Welcome to Boston Business Unfiltered, powered by Suffolk Seed, where we sit down with bold thinkers, builders, and leaders shaping the business landscape, not only here in Boston, but beyond. Today, we are so excited to be filming this episode live in front of our Suffolk students, faculty, and staff here on campus. I'm your host, Jonathan McTagg, and today we're kicking off our inaugural episode with a guest who's lived at the crossroads of Wall Street, Washington, and Main Street. Robert Wolf, former chairman and CEO of UBS Americas and founder of 32 Advisors. Known as one of the most influential voices in American finance and public policy, he is a trusted economic voice who's advised presidents, mentored entrepreneurs, and helped define what leadership looks like under real pressure. Robert, welcome to Boston Business Unfiltered, and we are so thrilled to have you.
Great to be here. The louder the applause, the more unfiltered I get.
Well,
It's good to be here. Usually I'm on TV with a lot of makeup, so I hope I look good to all you YouTubers out there.
Well, thank you again for being here. And let's start at the beginning, right? You played varsity football at Penn, 2 Ivy League championships, not exactly a low-stakes environment, right? So when you traded the helmet in for the spreadsheets, as they say, on Wall Street, was there a moment early in that Wall Street career that athletic mindset really helped you excel?
Yeah, listen, when I was on Wall Street, it was in the 80s. And we were a homogenous environment, not like this diverse class I'm speaking to. We were just white males. And being a locker room type guy, that was like the biggest plus you could have. And I remember being interviewed at Salomon Brothers. If you don't know, if you've read the book Liar's Poker, read the book. You'd think it was fiction, but it's not. And I remember the question they asked me. I said, I was really young. I was only 21 at the time I was interviewing. What are you looking for? And they said, a rocket scientist jock. And I said, well, I went to Wharton and I played varsity football. I know I'm one of the two. And I think that the athletic environment, the competition, the ability to actually be part of a team, kept me ambitious, kept me aspirational. But more importantly, being an athlete while going to a great Ivy League school, it just made me, set my day and my priorities much different. So partying only took place Wednesday to Sunday. So I had to keep Monday and Tuesday off.
So you talk about the Ivy League, you talk about being an athlete, and now you've talked about some of those, moments that made that experience maybe a little bit easier to excel in, right? What were some of those challenges that you faced?
Well, the biggest challenge is when you say played varsity football, it's the played. I actually just met one of your teachers, Mark Sanford, who I went to Marblehead High with, and he said to me, this guy was one of the best athletes out of our town. Being a football player from the North Shore of Boston and being a football player in Pennsylvania when they recruit from 50 states, including Florida, Michigan, Georgia, and those places, you realize that there's 2 different types of football. It was incredibly humbling. And you think you're all everything, and then you go over there and you're back to low man on the totem pole. So it was a humbling environment. I think they recruited, 30 or 40 kids, and I think 11 of us stayed as seniors. And I didn't play much, but I got on the field, I lettered, I was part of a great team. We won 2 Ivy League championships, and I loved being a student athlete. It was always an ambition for me to be a Division I player and graduate from a great school. And I had the ability to do that, and I think it gave me the path to be successful in Wall Street, which was an incredibly Darwinian environment back then. And I didn't mind that environment. Actually, it fit me perfectly.
I want to go back to something you said in your first statement, right, is you just talked a little bit about the diversity, right? You accomplished so much at UBS, a lot that the list goes on and on. You chaired the firm's first diversity committee. So something that you've said that has completely changed your perspective as a leader. What can you tell us about what you learned in those early conversations?
Well, Truth be told, when we had our executive committee in London, so I was the CEO of the region, but I was also president of the investment bank. We were in 49 states and 27 countries when I was running it. We had our executive committee and we decided, I forget when it was, in the late 80s or early 90s, we were going to have a diversity committee. I think our executive committee was like 10 guys. And so everyone took a step back, and there I was. I became the chair of the diversity committee. I forgot to take the step back. I say that with tongue in cheek, but it was kind of true. Like, no one wanted that risk of running a diversity committee. But I took it on, and I will tell you, what a learning lesson. I became a better husband. My wife was a lawyer at the time. I think I became a better father. You know, I was an aggressive type A, type A type guy. And I think, you know, you just learn a lot. You grow up, and I think part of growing up, you know, like I said, Wall Street in the 80s, there was no diversity. It became a bigger thing in the 90s. And, you know, like a win in diversity was getting, you know, the black managing director rate from 1% to 2%. That was, oh, we doubled it. As opposed to, really? We have a meritocracy in this country. 50% of this country are women. I think there's something like 15% are African American. X% is Asian. You know, we should look like the country. We always kind of wanted to get there, and those what I would call the cultural issues. And it kind of worked when we were in a bull market. But when I tell you, when we were in a bear market, culture was secondary to profitability and making sure that, you know, we stayed in our capitalist environment. And that's what happens with many of these firms. The pendulum swings. We're seeing that today. DEI was everything, and today DEI is a nasty word. Not at Suffolk. By the way, I applaud Suffolk because they kept their websites, they kept their professors, and they stayed true to to themselves, and that is a big thing. Okay, don't underestimate staying true to yourself.
I absolutely love that, and I think that's, you know, one of the best parts about the Suffolk community and so many others. And you know, you had mentioned the bear market, right? You mentioned the bull market and profitability, right? I want to bring you back to a time where it might not have been so profitable, and that is September of 2008. Anyone who knows you knows this story, that you were in the room, Lehman weekend, and a lot was happening. A lot was riding on the decisions of a few top executives, and you were one of them, for the world's global economic crisis that was looming during that time. And you had to make some tough decisions. You were in that boardroom. Can you share what that felt like? What kind of pressure was on you in order to accomplish, you know, the unimaginable?
Well, a couple of my students, Emma and Alfonso, is in the class, and I made them read Too Big to Fail. And that was about the Wall Street time for the Lehman crisis. I actually just tweeted out, my friend Andrew Ross Sorkin just did the book 1929 about, you know, obviously the Great Depression years, and he wrote Too Big to Fail. Listen, that was one of the most infamous times in Wall Street's history. Being there was surreal. We got called down. The Fed called us down Friday afternoon. We walk in. Titans of Wall Street were around the table. Not me, but 9 others. And we believed that we were larger than life, right? We could, you know, a good day was, you know, we walked on water, and a bad day was we won the Super Bowl. That was just how our ego was. We walked in, and all of a sudden, I think it was the Treasury Secretary or the Fed, the chairman of the Fed in New York and the SEC walked in and said, we're either going to save the industry and save Lehman over the weekend, or we're not. And our heart just dropped. And all of these titans of Wall Street, you could just see their legs shaking. And I was representing UBS. I think we were the 4th largest bank in the world at that time. And Goldman was there, and JP Morgan, and Bank of America. and Merrill Lynch, who was bought by Bank of America, and Morgan Stanley, who got an injection from a Japanese bank. We were, I would call us frenemies, the Wall Street guys. At that weekend, we went from adversaries to partners. We couldn't make it work. And then everyone, I like to say it's kind of fixed bayonet time. Then you got to protect your own castle. When you can make it work, you're all high-fiving, but we didn't make it work. Contagion hit hard. Lehman Brothers went down. Everything went down with it. I think, back then, it was just the banks. They started a thing called systemically important financial institutions. So that after that, the Fed regulated banks, insurance companies, money market funds, everyone big. They had to know what the left hand and the right hand was doing, as well as the shadow banking system. So things changed after that, which was called the Dodd-Frank bill, which I was advising President Obama during that time. And what you learn is the market is big. It's 24/7. Capital, when it can't move 24/7 around the world, then you become in dire straits. Because the minute different countries, different banks start putting up their fences, then all of a sudden capital doesn't move. And if capital doesn't move, the systems change. And we saw that with Silicon Valley Bank, which in my opinion was more of a digital move that took place. But yeah, it was the most surreal moment of my career, certainly. I screwed up in one way. I had my black car service, take me down to the Fed because we were having security around us. It was 3 days of nonstop. And my driver picks me up, and I walk out of the Fed, and it's a front page of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and it's me smiling, walking out of my black limo. Just what Wall Street wanted was one of the executives smiling, walking out of his limo, while literally the world was cratering. I didn't mean to smile. Actually, my guess is I think I was talking to my kids who were going to the Jets-Patriots game that day, but. It was not a smiling weekend for sure. And I think everyone should read Too Big to Fail and now read the book 1929, because those are two of the most important bookends of our financial history for all you smart business people.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue, talking about Too Big to Fail, right? So you were a visiting presidential fellow this year at Suffolk University, where you taught this past spring, as you just mentioned, a few students in the crowd. Your course was called Power, Policy, and Profit, Navigating Business in a Politically Charged World. The title is just as impressive as the content and everything else.
I didn't make up that title. I have to admit, my son's wife made it up.
Well, we have
She's
to give her
smart.
credit then. We
Yes.
have to give her credit. And with that, I was so fortunate enough to be present for a lot of those classes. You taught about banking and regulation. You talked about Too Big to Fail. You talked about COVID and DOGE and immigration and just so many topics in just a short period of time. Students were learning from someone who was in the room, which is really, really unique. And thinking about how that was only 6 months ago, out of kind of those subject matters that you spoke about, taught, and we all lived through, what is one that you think has turned for the best or turned for the worst within the last 6 months?
Unfortunately, I don't think that many things right now has turned for the best, if I'm being frank. And this has nothing to do with my view of the president. My view of the president's pretty well known. I'm the red meat on Fox, so for 9 years. So the minute they put, President Obama's economic advisor, you can see how many fans I may have. Listen, I think the immigration thing has just run amok in somewhat shameful way. We went through the case studies on Springfield. I think the DOGE thing, we just now have a continuation of DOGE with the shutdown in a much bigger way. We're talking about, the employees, the federal employees that are being furloughed, we may not bring them back. That would be a first time. I don't even know if that's legal. We're talking about, a vindictive way of projects we're seeing shut down. I think it's called the Gateway Tunnel between New Jersey and New York. First thing that this president shut down. So yeah, I think that was an extension of DOGE. Now, I was supportive of DOGE, the idea the government can be more efficient. But I wasn't supportive of Elon Musk taking a chainsaw to it and thinking that we could cut $2 trillion of it when I think he cut about 50 billion. You know, we talked a lot about the employment and what it will mean in this kind of new digital age. And, you know, we're starting to see that crack a bit. It will be interesting, the impact of AI on employment. I think if I was going to teach that class again, we would continue that with talking about those type of things. But listen, the geopolitical risk, we talked about a lot about the geopolitical risk in Ukraine and the energy markets. You know, people ask me, I think today, both Caitlin and Courtney asked me, how you doing? Listen, my family's doing great, I'm doing great. But how am I doing? We wake up to crazy, we go to sleep to crazy. Right now, the normal is no longer that normal. So yeah, I have concerns. And I think that I applaud some of these schools like my alma mater that said no to the federal policy for these schools. MIT, I think, said no. Brown said no. So I think we have to stand up to with our principles, and that's a hard thing to do because we live in a social media environment where you can be bullied very quickly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's not easy. I'm not here to say there's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's incredible light at the end of the tunnel. We're just going through what I would say some real bumps in the road. And I think all of us, including all of you in the audience, you got to figure out how to smooth them out. You got to figure out how to wake up, put your game pants on every day, and figure out what you're going to do to feel good about what you're doing every day to make yourself successful and to help others. And I think if you do that, then I think actually 1 + 1 will equal 4, and 2 + 2 will equal 6, and we'll start growing the pie. But I think everyone's got to, you know, kind of lean in.
Yeah, I want to continue on your point of employment right now, right? And speaking of the bumps in the road, I think that, you know, some of graduating students, you know, starting their first job or internship are having a hard time finding that first job, right? But, you know, there's a lot of individuals out there listening to this that are of all ages, right? Who are just graduating college, who may be mid-level career or maybe at the latter part of their career. And there's a lot of, you know, tension right now on the job market and finding a job or a role that suits them, finding a salary where they're paying back student loans or providing for a family. What's your outlook on this? What's your vision for this?
You know, finding a good job has always been hard. This did not become something overnight. Let's not kid ourselves. There's a few things that can make you look and sound exceptional. And it starts with yourself feeling confident. Because I used to say, when I hire someone, I want to sit next to someone who's good. So I've always been someone who has waffled that line of confidence and arrogance, but not in an immature way. I think I'm really good, but I read a shitload. I said no F-bombs too. I told President
Kelly,
unfiltered. No F-bombs. But I read a lot. I'm well read. I feel, you know, I gave a speech to Suffolk at graduation a few years ago. And it was kind of like my whole idea was it's cool to be smart. I'm not cool. But it feels like I go into a room, I can talk about a myriad of things with depth. Am I the smartest one in the room? No, but I'm pretty damn smart because I'm well read. And I told my class, wake up, be well read. You'll walk into a room, you'll have a little hop in your step. You'll feel a little more confident. Communication's everything, okay? Get off your damn phones. Speak to each other. Talk to each other. Because when you go in an interview, they're going to want to, this is what I kind of did. I used to say, who do I want to sit next to for 8 to 12 hours a day? And if that guy or gal was fun, outgoing, I already knew they were smart. They weren't going to see me if they weren't smart. Their resume was already good. So what was that it thing that would want me sit next to them and spend my time to make them good? A lot of it had to do with communication. I was just in someone's management class, and I loved the idea that she had everyone stand up and talk. Emma and Alfonso will tell you, we talked for 3 hours. I made them debate each other. I made them present continually. I don't know if they liked my class or not, but I know that they walked out of that class feeling like if they could do it with each other and with me hounding them, then they could easily do it outside of the classroom. But it's important, like, don't kid yourself. People want to hire the best freaking people. The toughest thing right now is getting in the door. It's hard. And I'm sure it's hard for Suffolk. Suffolk's a good school. Listen, I think what you guys are doing, whether it's with the podcast tonight, or whether it's with the SEED program, or focusing on AI, these things are going to make a big difference for you. You know why? Because there's going to be a buzz about this school. And if there's a buzz about this school, then all of a sudden CEOs will take note of it and say, what's going on here? I heard about, this new program. I watched that podcast. All these things make a difference. It's all about branding and marketing. We live in an influencer creator world, right? Isn't that what they say? We live in a creator world. You guys got to start making sure you create, the school creates. I think they're actually stepping up, and that's why I'm here.
What we're doing here at Suffolk is moving it forward in the right direction. And I think what's so great about it is something that you strongly believe in is Suffolk University sticking to our mission and vision of providing that opportunity and access. And I think that's what's so, so important. And providing those smaller classroom sizes to actually interact with you as the professor. And you said CEOs will get our attention. You're our CEO. We have your attention.
Hey, listen, I was tweeting out pictures of our classroom.
and we were following.
We actually have our own text messaging chain.
Yes, we do. And those students are doing a fantastic job, and some of them have graduated at this point.
We call it top of the class.
Top of the class. So if you teach again, we'll have to have some of the individuals in here if it's not too late to join the class. So you talk about sitting in rooms with people that are, high energy, high impact. You want to be part of a winning team, right? So let's go to one of your favorite subjects, I think. We've had many conversations about this individual, and I know he's one of your closest friends, but as you call him, 44, President Barack Obama. You served on President Obama's administration's economic councils, and more recently on the Defense Business Board at the Pentagon. In those policy rooms, words carry weight. How do you, someone who is a former CEO and president of one of the world's largest banks, decide when it's time to speak or when it's time to just hang in the back of the room and listen?
Listen, I've been incredibly fortunate to be able to call, President Obama one of my closest friends. And I now serve as treasurer and chief risk officer for the Obama Foundation. And he's my golf partner. Listen, I think everything's a bit of a learning curve. And when you are in the Oval Office or the Roosevelt Room and you're invited in, it's because they want to hear your expertise. So if I was going to talk about foreign policy, he would have probably given me one of these looks. Because he knows that's not my specialty. In other words, he's saying, shut the F up. So he has a lot of specialists. My specialty was finance. It was during the Lehman crisis. It was during the recession. We were writing new regulation. I testified on infrastructure. If you stay tight in your sandbox and you bring expertise to the forefront, then you get listened to. But one thing I really learned is, when you're the President of the United States, you have a big jigsaw puzzle. Maybe what I tell him is a great idea, but it may not just fit in his puzzle. So he used to say, Robert's like truth serum. But you know what I love about Robert? He doesn't take it personally when I don't listen to what he thinks I should do. And I learned that because he's looking at how it all fits together, right? He's Leonardo da Vinci painting with all the different colors. And we may not know what it's going to look at, but he knows where he wants to go with it. And so I think that whenever you're advising, whether it's a CEO, a president, or a student, give your best advice. Don't take it personally whether they agree or disagree, but feel glad that they want to hear you, that they want to hear what you have to say. I mean, that's, advising the president is an honor of a lifetime. Advising the Pentagon was an honor of a lifetime. And so, I think President Obama was an incredible listener. And listen, he's a brilliant man and he's a thinker, and, his success speaks for itself. But it was an honor of a lifetime.
And we know you'll send this to him, once this comes out. So for the record, you now have to be honest with us. When you're on the course, who wins?
We're partners. But he's a better he's a better golfer than me, but we actually won a lot this summer.
That's great. And I want to switch gears a little bit, right? So, after this amazing experience, and I know you're still advising presidents and other government officials, but 32 Advisors, right, operates in a very fascinating space, operating between finance, infrastructure, strategy. What's one piece of your model that competitors maybe underestimate, and something that gives you the quiet edge, if you will?
So, if I'm being honest, I don't think anyone thinks about 32 advisors other than me. It's really me, myself, and I. It's not 32 people. It's my college football number. 32 advisors started after I left UBS, and leaving UBS was incredibly humbling, right? You're at a high perch, and then all of a sudden you're on your own, 4 rooms. You have a website, a ton of pictures of me. My wife would say, enough about you, Robert. But I didn't know what I was going to do, and I was meandering, and I've been meandering since 2012. That's okay. Meandering is dynamic, it's exciting, it's fun. I have an open door policy. I'm listening to smart entrepreneurs every day. I listen to bright ideas every day. 32 Advisors has morphed because we live in a dynamic society, and finance is dynamic. 32 Advisors started as advisory stuff, and we did advisory with foreign direct investment and infrastructure and economics, and it got boring for me. So now I advise, I think, 3 or 4 companies. But now I moved to 32 Ventures, and that's what you would call like a family office. And we've done, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 investments. And some small, some big, all different types. And that's been incredibly exciting because, you're risking your own money, you're saying yes, you're saying no, and most of my time is spent on that. I would say about 20% of my time spent on 32 Advisors, probably 10 or 15% of my time spent on Fox doing TV, and then the bulk is spent on my 32 Ventures. And we're listening to hundreds of ideas throughout the year. A few years ago, we were investing in 10 plus a year, maybe even 20. Today, maybe it's, 1 a quarter. Things don't feel as good. They don't feel as exciting. The exit strategy, the timetable's gone longer. I'm a capitalist. I want to make money. But being able to listen to entrepreneurs is really special. There's brilliant people, of all ages, ideas of all different times. 32 Ventures started more thematic. One year we invested in climate stuff. Another year we invested in platform businesses. We invested in cannabis one year. So we invested in all types of stuff. Then we started investing in more EBITDA positive companies. We've invested with a Suffolk alum. We're partners on hydraulic distribution centers. So we're all over the place. If you looked at my portfolio, you would say he doesn't know what he's doing, but there's some thought process to it.
That's fantastic. And judging by your career that has, crossed every arena, I think you know a little bit about what you're doing. Between finance, government, and entrepreneurship, and I know we're coming up on time for the podcast, so between all of these different areas, I think, a kind of closeout question for you is, what's the smallest moment recently that's reminded you why you still do all this? Something maybe quiet, maybe personal, that keeps the spark alive in everything you do?
I think the smallest moment is kind of when I wake up in the morning. I do the same thing. I read for about an hour, maybe even longer. Then I may go work out and I'll listen to a podcast. To me, it's like the small thing. It's what did I learn to start my day that kind of makes me feel smart. If you saw my room, I'm a neat freak. My clothes are folded perfectly. And I don't need an alarm clock to wake up. I wake up about 5:15 a.m. every morning because that's when I woke up for 20 years trading, and it's still built in. And so when I wake up, I read my Wall Street Journal, I read the New York Times, and then I kind of look at the Washington Post and Axios and Politico, maybe about a half a dozen different things. And then I may decide to listen to a podcast, either The Daily or some other. And then I kind of start my day, and my day is very dynamic. I could have 10 different calls, and one would have nothing to do with the other. Or I have no calls because I want to read about a certain theme that I may be investing in. It's kind of like having a habit or a routine that makes you feel good about starting your day. That to me is very important. And the last thing I'll say to the classroom, take prudent risks. If you want to get ahead in life, take prudent risks. You always have to keep going forward. And the best way to go forward is when you see something, if you think it's right for you, go for it. You know, we're going to get knocked down a few times, but a good thing about this country, you can get back up and go for it again. No one's keeping count. Nobody's keeping count. Okay? All they care about is the time you win. All right? That's it. People forget Babe Ruth. He had the most strikeouts ever. They only think about he had the most home runs, right? You got to get the bat off your shoulder and swing. So I would just say that take advantage of what Suffolk is giving you, know what it's giving you, and kind of go for it.
I absolutely love that, Robert. And we're glad at the small moment at 5:15 this morning, you woke up and you drove out here to Boston and got to spend the day with us, and we appreciate it. So, Robert, thank you very much for kicking off the first episode of Boston Business Unfiltered. It's, of course, been a privilege to dive deeper into your story and hear your honest truth about leadership, innovation, and what it really takes to build. So if you have enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to like, subscribe, and share Boston Business Unfiltered with your friends, family, powered by Seed. We've got an incredible lineup ahead in this series. More voices, more ideas, and more stories that go beyond the headlines to reveal what's really shaping the business world, not just here in Boston, but beyond. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Boston Business Unfiltered.